History remembers Egyptian pharaohs as god-kings, conquerors in chariots, architects of wonders, masters of life and death. But for every Ramses the Great or Thutmose the Conqueror, there's another ruler who checked out of life in a way that's, well, less immortal god and more avoidable headline. These were men and women with armies, gold and absolute power, and yet their final moments were shaped by bad luck, worse decisions, or both. In this video, we're counting down 8 Egyptian pharaohs whose ridiculous and avoidable ends could have been prevented with a little more caution, a little less hubris, and maybe a decent security detail. 1. Seqenenre Tao, the pharaoh who took a diplomatic meeting to the skull. In the late 17th dynasty, Egypt was basically running a two-government system. The native pharaohs in Thebes controlled the south, and the Hyksos, foreign rulers from the Levant, held the north, with their capital in Avaris. This uneasy arrangement was like having 2 CEOs for one company, both pretending it could work, while secretly planning hostile takeovers. Seqenenre Tao inherited this mess. He was young, ambitious, and wanted the Hyksos gone, but war wasn't yet declared. So when the Hyksos ruler Apipi sent a strange complaint allegedly about hippopotamuses in Thebes, making too much noise and disturbing his sleep hundreds of miles away, Seqenenre went to talk. Was the complaint real? Probably not. Most historians think it was a political insult, a way of baiting Seqenenre into conflict. But here's the problem. Whatever happened next wasn't recorded in polite diplomatic language. It was written directly into his skull. When his mummy was unwrapped in 1886, archaeologists saw blunt force trauma and deep cuts from at least 3 different weapons: a battle axe, a spear, and a sword, all to the head. No defensive wounds on his arms. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution. The leading theory? He either walked into negotiations without adequate guard, or he was ambushed and captured during an early skirmish. The Hyksos then finished the job with brutal efficiency. It's even possible he was tied up and killed in ritual fashion, the multiple weapons symbolizing the Hyksos' dominance. For a pharaoh, this was a colossal lapse in judgment. You don't walk into enemy territory with less protection than a celebrity at a fan meet and greet. His death didn't end the conflict, it lit the fuse. His sons Kamosi and Ahmosi I picked up where he left off, eventually expelling the Hyksos entirely. But Seqenenre's story remains a lesson in the one rule every ruler should tattoo onto their palace gates. Never attend peace talks hosted by the enemy unless you're willing to redecorate the afterlife with your own skull. But while Seqenenre's death was sudden and brutal, the next ruler's end was more of a slow-motion car crash, the kind you can see coming from miles away, but no one does anything to stop it. And when you hear what he tried to change, you'll wonder how he lasted as long as he did. 2. Akhenaten, the pharaoh who rebuilt religion and possibly starved himself. If ancient Egypt had Yelp reviews for its rulers, Akhenaten's page would be chaos. Half the comments would call him a visionary reformer. The other half would say he ruined everything, 0 stars, and would not worship again. When he came to the throne in the mid-14th century BCE, Egypt's religion had been running like clockwork for over 1,000 years. Dozens of gods, hundreds of temples, and an army of priests managing offerings, festivals, and the daily business of keeping the gods happy. Akhenaten looked at this vast, intricate system and thought, what if we scrap the whole thing and just worship one god instead? Also, I'll be his personal representative. Oh, and this new god is the sun disk. He shut down the temples to other gods, moved the capital to a brand new city called Akhetaten, modern Amarna, and poured Egypt's resources into building open-air temples to Aten. If you were a priest of Amun, this was the career equivalent of showing up to work one morning and finding out your office was now a smoothie bar. But Akhenaten wasn't just disruptive in religion, he may have neglected the basics of ruling a kingdom. Artistic depictions show him with an elongated skull, wide hips, and thin limbs, leading some researchers to speculate he suffered from a genetic disorder like Marfan syndrome or Froehlich's syndrome. Combined with possible malnutrition, the result was a ruler who looked less like a warrior king and more like a man who desperately needed iron supplements. By the end of his reign, Egypt's empire was fraying. Letters from desperate governors in the empire's outer territories begged for military aid against foreign threats and went unanswered. When Akhenaten died, cause still debated, but illness is a strong contender. The entire religious revolution unraveled almost overnight. His successor, the young Tutankhamun, changed his name to Tutankhamun and reopened the old temples, essentially rehiring all the priests Akhenaten had fired. In short, Akhenaten tried to rewrite 1,000 years of religion, but forgot to maintain the political and physical health to make it stick. It's the ancient equivalent of installing a revolutionary operating system on your computer and then letting the battery run out. Akhenaten's reign crumbled under its own weight, but his son's fate was faster and far stranger. Because when you hear how Egypt's most famous boy king might have died, you'll realize it wasn't curses or assassins. It was something far more reckless. 3. Tutankhamun, the boy king who couldn't survive a chariot ride. Tutankhamun's fame today is bigger than his actual reign ever was. His tomb, discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter, was a time capsule of ancient Egypt, gold masks, jeweled daggers, and enough treasures to make every history textbook jealous. But behind the glamour, the boy king lived a short, physically fragile life that ended in a way that feels more like a tragic sports accident than the climax of a royal saga. Tutankhamun came to the throne at around 9 years old, inheriting a country still reeling from the religious chaos caused by his probable father, Akhenaten. He reversed the Aten cult, reopened temples, and restored the old gods, though, let's be honest, this was more likely the work of his advisors than the ideas of a kid who hadn't even finished growing. Physically, he wasn't the picture of pharaonic strength. CT scans of his mummy reveal a clubfoot, a cleft palate, and evidence of multiple malarial infections. In other words, not exactly the build for chariot racing, which makes what happened next all the more eyebrow-raising. A 2005 scan revealed a shattered leg, broken just days before his death. Further research suggested crushing injuries to his ribcage and sternum, consistent with a high-speed crash in a chariot. Historians now think Tutankhamun may have been riding or even hunting when he fell or collided at speed. Without modern medicine, the broken leg likely became infected, and the malaria in his system probably finished what the accident started. The irony is staggering. A teenage king, the living embodiment of divine power, may have died the same way a modern teenager might, in a reckless ride gone wrong. No assassination, no grand betrayal, no battle wounds, just a fatal reminder that even kings can't cheat physics. If Tutankhamun's death was dramatic, our next pharaoh's is painfully ordinary, and yet it's a type of killer that's still around today. And the most unbelievable part, it attacked him in the one place you'd think a god king would have perfect protection. 4. Psusen's-I, the pharaoh who let his teeth kill him. By the time Psusen's I took the throne in Egypt's 21st dynasty, the country was well past its pyramid-building glory days. Political power was split between the royal court in the north at Tanis and the high priests of Amun in Thebes. In short, Egypt was less a unified empire and more like two semi-friendly franchises using the same brand name. Psusen's wasn't a warrior king carving his name into foreign lands. He was more of a diplomatic administrator. His reign, which may have lasted over 4 decades, was relatively peaceful. He focused on trade, temple building, and keeping the fragile balance between the secular and religious powers. His tomb, found in 1940 by Pierre Montet, was packed with silver treasures, including a solid silver coffin, a rare sight in Egypt, where gold usually stole the spotlight. But here's the twist. When his mummy was examined, Scientists didn't find signs of battle wounds, poisoning, or political assassination. Instead, they found something far less dramatic and far more dental. Pharaohs had horrific tooth decay abscesses, missing molars, inflamed gums. In the ancient world, without antibiotics, a severe tooth infection could turn deadly fast. Once the infection entered the bloodstream, septicemia, blood poisoning, set in, and the chances of survival dropped to near zero. So here was a man who kept Egypt stable during an era of fragmentation, who was buried in a coffin fit for a god, taken down by bacteria in his own mouth. No invading army, no palace coup, just untreated dental disease doing what swords and spears could not. It's a grim reminder that in ancient Egypt, even a pharaoh's immortality could be undone by something as small as a cavity. Pharaohs was taken down by something he never saw coming. Ramesses III, on the other hand, had the danger sitting in his dining room, smiling at him every night. And when you hear who was behind it, you might never look at a royal family the same way again. 5. Ramesses III, the pharaoh who ignored the plot in his own palace. Ramesses III is often called the last great pharaoh of the New Kingdom, and to be fair, he earned it. He fought off foreign invasions from the Libyans and the mysterious sea peoples, kept Egypt's borders mostly intact, and even managed some ambitious building projects at a time when the empire's glory was fading. But for all his battlefield skill, he completely missed the one enemy he couldn't afford to ignore: his own wives. What happened is now known as the Harem Conspiracy, and it reads like a soap opera written by Machiavelli. One of Ramesses' secondary wives, Queen Tiye, decided her son Pentuer should be the next pharaoh instead of the official crown prince. To make that happen, she didn't just whisper in the right ears, she launched a full-blown palace coup. The conspirators included servants, scribes, and even military officers. Their plan? Assassinate the pharaoh during the Opet festival in Thebes, when his guard would be relaxed and the city in full celebration mode. This wasn't some back-alley plot, it was coordinated across multiple branches of palace life. For reasons still debated, Ramesses never caught wind of it, or if he did, he underestimated it. When his mummy was scanned in 2012, researchers found a deep, lethal cut across his throat, so severe it nearly decapitated him. Inside his wrappings, embalmers had even placed an amulet meant to heal wounds, almost like an ancient get-well-soon card, suggesting they knew exactly how he died. The conspirators didn't get away with it. After a swift trial, many were executed or forced to commit suicide. Pentuer himself was found mummified in an unorthodox, hasty burial, possibly as punishment. But for Ramesses III, none of that mattered. He had defended Egypt from foreign invaders, only to lose everything to a knife wielded by someone who had dinner with him the night before. It's the ultimate cautionary tale for powerful leaders. Fortify your borders all you want, but if you ignore the daggers in your own hallways, you're just decorating for your own murder. Ramesses learned the cost of ignoring betrayal in his own palace. Cleopatra's gamble was different. She knew the danger, saw it coming, and still bet everything anyway. And the stakes? Only the survival of Egypt itself. 6. Cleopatra VII, the queen who bet everything on Rome. Cleopatra VII Philippa wasn't just the last pharaoh of Egypt, she was one of the sharpest political minds of the ancient world. Fluent in multiple languages, including Egyptian, which many earlier rulers didn't even bother to learn, skilled in diplomacy, and savvy enough to keep Egypt independent while Rome swallowed up everyone around them, Cleopatra played a dangerous game. But in the end, she placed a bet on the wrong Romans. When Julius Caesar visited Egypt, Cleopatra formed a personal and political alliance with him, famously entering the royal palace, rolled up in a carpet, or more likely, a sack of linens, to bypass guards and make her case face to face. That relationship solidified her position on the throne and gave her a son, Caesarion. But Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE forced Cleopatra to find a new ally fast. Enter Mark Antony. Charismatic, ambitious, and one of Rome's top generals, Antony seemed like the perfect partner. Together, they formed both a political alliance and a romantic relationship, merging Egyptian wealth with Roman military muscle. The problem? Antony's rival back in Rome, Octavian, was equally ambitious and far more ruthless. The conflict came to a head at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Cleopatra and Antony's combined forces were decisively defeated. They fled to Alexandria, where the situation unraveled quickly. Hearing false news that Cleopatra had died, Antony fell on his sword. When Cleopatra learned Octavian planned to take her to Rome as a living war trophy, she refused to give him that satisfaction. The traditional story says she smuggled an asp, a venomous Egyptian cobra, into her chamber and let it bite her. Modern theories suggest poison or a sharp hairpin laced with venom. Whatever the method, she died on her own terms. But here's the avoidable part. Cleopatra had other options. She could have negotiated a surrender, fled south into Nubia, or shifted her alliances earlier in the Roman Civil War. Instead, she tied Egypt's fate to two Roman men, both of whom lost. It was a masterclass in political brilliance undone by a single, catastrophic gamble. Cleopatra played the biggest political game in the ancient world and lost. But Amenemhat I's fall proves you don't need Rome breathing down your neck to lose the throne. Sometimes, the people who guard you are the ones sharpening the knives. 7. Amenemhat the Pharaoh, who skipped the security check. Amenemhat I wasn't born into royalty. He was a commoner who rose through the ranks, likely starting as a military commander under the last king of the 11th dynasty. His rise to power around 1991 BCE marked the start of Egypt's 12th dynasty, one of the Middle Kingdom's most stable and prosperous eras. He moved the capital north to a new city called Ichtawi, restructured the government, and launched military campaigns to secure Egypt's borders. By all accounts, Amenemhat was shrewd, disciplined, and very aware of the dangers of politics. In fact, we know from the Instruction of Amenemhat, a text written in his voice after his death, that he constantly warned his heir about the treachery of court politics. The irony? His own death came from exactly the kind of palace conspiracy he'd been warning about. According to ancient accounts, Amenemhat was attacked at night by members of his own guard. The timing was perfect for the conspirators. His son and co-regent, Senusret I, was away leading a military campaign in Libya. The assassins likely believed that removing the pharaoh, while the heir was absent, would destabilize the transition of power. Details of the attack are scarce, but the instruction hints at betrayal from trusted insiders. If true, that means the men who killed Amenemhat were the same ones who swore oaths to protect him, a bitter twist for a ruler who had unified Egypt after decades of division. The assassination didn't work out as planned. Senusret raced back to the capital, secured the throne, and hunted down the conspirators. But Amenemhat's death remains a masterclass in what happens when a leader forgets the most important rule of survival. Trust is a luxury you can't afford in a palace full of sharp blades. Amenemhat's killers struck in the dead of night. Menkare's enemy wasn't human at all, and the strange thing is, he might have seen it coming. Or at least, that's what the ancient legends say. 8. Menkare, the builder who couldn't outrun disease. Menkare, builder of the smallest of the three main pyramids at Giza, ruled during Egypt's Old Kingdom in the 26th century BCE. His reign was remembered, at least by later tradition, as relatively benevolent. Ancient historian Herodotus, writing centuries later, claimed Menkare rolled back some of the harsher policies of his father, Khafre, and reigned with a lighter hand. Whether or not that's historically exact, his name has survived with a surprisingly positive reputation for a pharaoh of that era. But Menkare's reign ended abruptly, and ancient Egyptian sources give the story a mystical twist. According to some legends, an oracle foretold that Menkare would die young. Determined to defy fate, the king allegedly lit lamps and held feasts every night, determined to squeeze more days into his life by living both day and night as if it were daytime. This was either a stroke of poetic genius or a long-term plan for exhaustion and liver failure. Historically, the likelier cause of his death was disease. His reign seems to have been stable, but it didn't last as long as one might expect for a ruler in his prime. There are hints of a sudden illness or epidemic, possibly plague, sweeping through his court. Whatever the cause, his death was so unexpected that his pyramid was unfinished at the time. His successor and likely son, Shepseskaf, completed it, though with some architectural shortcuts. If the prophecy story is true, Menkauri's solution to an early death was to party harder and never sleep, which, in fairness, is one way to live life to the fullest. But in the end, neither feasts nor extra daylight hours could outmaneuver mortality. His smaller pyramid still stands at Giza, a monument to ambition, optimism, and perhaps a little denial in the face of fate. From a diplomatic blunder that ended with a Hyksos battle axe in the skull, to a palace coup carried out by people who literally lived down the hall, to gambling an entire nation on the outcome of someone else's civil war. These stories prove that even the most powerful people in history were still vulnerable to human error, bad health, and worse planning. Egyptian pharaohs built monuments to outlast time itself, but some couldn't even outlast their own mistakes. Their ends weren't just tragic, they were preventable. So now I'm curious, which of these pharaohs do you think had the most avoidable end, and what would you have done differently in their place? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because if history teaches us anything, it's that hindsight is the one thing the gods forgot to give us.